Hello, Western Civ class 105. Welcome to week 6. And there's just a few things I want to point out about the arrangement of this week, the exam, and just a little added kind of commentary on the subject matter that we're going into. So with the exam, this is your first one. And really, essentially, if you have been getting full points for your Sunday papers, you're most likely going to be able to get full points for the exam. Essentially, I want you to do what you've been doing with the Sunday papers, but you're putting more time into it, and I expect double, at least, of the work that you've been doing, okay? So, essentially, in my opinion, instead of doing multiple choice, which I try to avoid when I can for exams, I think by you thinking about the content that we've covered and being able to kind of go over it in your mind and put it out on a piece of paper can help you learn and retain a lot of the information that you have been learning. So that's my hope. Now, you will notice that I also don't have any lectures in this week's module, just documentaries. And there's two reasons. One, it goes back to when I discussed this with you before. I originally had this class set up as a cram course, and this section is really kind of my complement. It's like part 2 of last week's module, and it's the bridge going into the next week's work. With these survey courses, we just cover so much information that's very important. And, we professors, sometimes we struggle with how much we should give you for, how much time we should spend on all of these important events. And sometimes when we try to cram in so much, the students essentially don't retain information. So then what's the point, is what many of us would say, right? Now, in my face-to-face class, of course, I really like to talk about the French Revolution. That's going to be a part of this as well. So we're going to talk about enlightened absolutist monarchs and then the French Revolution. And what you've been learning, like I said, and what we're covering now, and the relationship and the nature of monarchy in Europe, and then the rebellion or the all-out attack against monarchy in the French Revolution is so huge. I took an entire class at UC Santa Cruz based on the French Revolution with about 7 books that we had to read in the class. And I'm supposed to give this to you in this week's module, or break it up maybe 2 max if I was going to just focus on the French Revolution. It's so important. Now, I'm not even putting a lecture in here. I'm having you watch documentaries. And part of this is because, first of all, I've watched these documentaries quite a bit, and I really think that they're going to give you a visualization of some examples of what we're talking about, absolute monarchs, and the French Revolution. And the French Revolution and the results of it, I will discuss more also in next week's section as we talk about the effects of it, because it's a very important revolution. And so you'll notice I only have a few videos. They're longer, and if you look in the assignment for Thursday, it says 6 notes per video. So you're going to pay attention a little bit more closer to these documentaries, and I'm going to see notes on them showing that you understand the content that we've just covered, okay? So make sure you do it that way. And like I said, then next week we will have even a little bit more clarity on some of the aspects of the French Revolution and its legacy. But what's also interesting, as we've been talking about monarchy and an absolute monarch, an enlightened monarchy, I'm currently living in Thailand that has a monarchy. That it's not an absolute, it used to be. That changed in the 30s. It's a constitutional monarchy. But the monarch here is very, very important to Thai people and to Thai culture. And I think in many ways that when I look back at the way that Europeans used to think about their kings and queens, I don't know if it's that much different, although it is in a different way. So I just thought I would share kind of a few things about this in Thailand, just to kind of bridge this knowledge in with what you're learning. So I bought this book at the mall here. This is something that you could easily get. And here it is in English, called Strength of the Land. And these are in several volumes of basically talking about how their late king. So this is the last. So there's a current king right now, which is the son of late king here, and this king was very popular, extremely popular, very loved. And there's also a lot of literature and art everywhere showing the work and activities that he was doing for the country. Now, I'm going to read you just this one little section and give you an idea of just how this works in the modern times and how this would have maybe worked out also in the past in terms of, I'm going to use the word propaganda neutrally, meaning how a state tries to portray itself is what I mean by that, okay? Now, here there's a section on when they're trying to get rid of opium that was being sold in the mountains. And some of the people in the hill tribes, they're trying to get them to do different kind of crops. And so here's what it says in this book. The authorities tried to do something about the hill tribes. Their solutions were to move them out of the forest by force and to raid their farms and destroy their opium poppies. But this did not work very well. And so then it goes on to say, what the authorities were unable to achieve by force, now the authorities meaning the part of the government that's not associated with the monarch, right? The actual state. His Majesty the King has achieved through compassion and understanding. His Majesty's way has always been to seek out his people and try to help them. For the king, this meant even those in the most remote parts of the kingdom and those who were not ethnic ties. Now, I simply try to show this to you to illustrate this kind of fatherly, paternal role that Thais perceive of their king. And this is really also associated much with the Hindu temple court system. Is very much influenced this part of the world. And, you know, the one thing that I've noticed, which is very interesting, if you look at North Korea and the way that the leaders are there portrayed, which is constantly being talked about, are associated with communism, because officially that's what they embraced. It really looks much more like one of these kind of kingship relationships. I mean, already now it's the leaders now, the sons are ruling, right, in North Korea. And the idea of the leader being the helper and constantly in pictures with the people, this is something I see here in Thailand, completely opposite of, it's not communist. And so, you know, that kind of respect would have been often maybe the same. Look, here, there's very strict laws. If you say anything negative about the king, you can go to prison for a long time. This is also what we used to do in Europe. Now, something changed in Europe that makes what, for an American especially, so shocking. Because remember, we as Americans, those of us who are American, and my students, most of you are, but not all of my students are, we actually disrespected our king. That was our king. We were subjects of the UK, and the patriots, the nationalists, rejected the idea of kingship and being associated with Britain. So we have a legacy that is very opposite. And it's very similar also to what you see with the French Revolution. The French Revolution was to reject the idea and actually to be very violent against the idea of monarchy. Ultimately, the monarchy, there would be a monarchy coming back. It wasn't a fully successful mission. But the legacy of the United States and France was to be very anti-monarchy. And then you see with European nations, many kept their monarchies, but essentially they were reduced to having no power. And so here we are in Thailand, where the king still has a lot of authority and requires that respect. So anyhow, I just thought I would kind of mention that to kind of get you realizing, okay, this still exists in the world. It's not just like the monarchy in the UK, which are more like figureheads that people just kind of put on tabloids. And the way that they get involved in scandals with the tabloids is not something at all would be acceptable in Thailand. The movie King and I, which is a very popular old movie in the United States, that depicts one of their very celebrated kings here in Thailand, is actually banned. Okay, the King and I is not allowed to be shown here in Thailand because they want their kings to be represented very respectfully, okay, on their terms. And so, you know, you're taking Western Civ, and we're learning about how the development of the Western world. I wanted to also talk a little bit about the Eastern world and kind of get you just to think about where they've been similar and different, and the different historical paths the different nations have went down, and at the same time to say that it's because that here has been very influenced by the West just the same. And so that's all I'm going to say about that for now. I just thought I would share that information. I hope that you enjoy these documentaries. I hope that you find that you've learned enough information that the exam is actually much more enjoyable than difficult. And if you have any questions, please get back a hold of me as soon as possible. Have a great week.